Welcome to our next discipleship class here at Bible Made Clear. So we had stopped at the end of point number 3. It is true that the theistic God exists. We had gone through and presented evidence for the cosmological argument. So the rest of these we will follow as we continue with the progression. However, today we've done the cosmological argument. The universe had a beginning, so there is a beginner. And then today we will begin into the teleological argument, or creation is design, so there is a designer. So for more information, because I'm using a lot of Dr. Norman Geisler's materials. I mean, the framework actually is his presentation, and it's adjusted. So you can get information at normangeisler.com. Also, for Frank Turek and his materials and resources, which I also use, and you'll be able to see some of his videos. They're at crossexamine.org. So as we move through here, we did this. Today we're going to begin looking at design, and then after that is the moral argument. But those are the three basic arguments for why God exists, the existence of God. So the teleological argument, every design has a designer. Therefore, the universe is fine-tuned, requiring a designer. It's very easy to conclude that. Information and messaging requires design, and there is information and messaging in the design. Specified complexity requires design. Things do not become complex on their own with order. Irreducible complexity also reveals design. In other words, you cannot just reverse engineer what exists in creation and life and then think that you can just reverse it down to some single-celled amoeba or whatever that Darwin thought was there. That is not possible. And if you can't reverse it down, it certainly can't graduate up. All design has forethought and purpose, requiring a designer. So these things are a logical necessity. They're certainly easily understood. So let's see where we can go with this. Now, every design has a designer. This is picturesque of William Paley's argument that if you're walking in the woods and you saw a watch, you would know that it was designed. It didn't just get there on its own. Well, the universe has also complexity and forethought, and so it didn't. But both designs, whether it's the watch or the universe, require a designer. The universe is designed in a different way. Actually, much more complexity is required. So atheists reject design. Richard Dawkins says in his book, The God Delusion, in an attempt to avoid design, on page 157, he writes, "This chapter has contained the central argument of my book, summarized here in 6 numbered points." Now, the 6 numbered points come out of Frank Turek's book, Stealing from God, but he did such a good job to try to fix it I'd probably ruin it. So, number 1, explaining the appearance of design in the universe has been one of the greatest challenges facing the human intellect over the centuries. Right? Now, that's what Dawkins states. Frank Turek's response is, if scientists can't trust what they observe as obvious design, how can they trust any of their other observations? And that's, should I say it, that is so obvious because, if I have to start mistrusting my own senses so that I trust, Richard Dawkins' senses, then that means that I can't understand anything unless I have Richard Dawkins, which is a little bit of a silly way to try to get through life and understand what the truth is. Why is it that his observation is true, but mine isn't, right? So obviously, we have to be able to trust our observations and not just change them if they don't, fit the evolution narrative. It's tempting to explain that appearance of design by reference to a designer, and then his point number 3, but citing a designer only raises the larger question of who designed the designer. Again, Frank's response to 2 and 3 is if the universe wasn't designed, Dawkins is still stuck with who made the universe because it still has to be an eternal, uncaused cause, not part of time, space, and matter. In other words, backing it up 1 degree certainly does not change any of the foundation here for atheists and Richard Dawkins in particular. If you say who created God, well, you're assuming that God is created. And then not only that, but whatever God created him, he wasn't created. In other words, you can't go on this infinite regression. You have to get back to some ultimate uncaused cause that was eternally existent and then made everything else that had a beginning, because we know time, space, and matter did have a beginning. And that's because of what we know, right? In other words, we come to conclusions based on what we know. We take evidence and then we work from the evidence, which is the effect, back to cause. And that's how we do that. Number 4, since Darwin showed that the simple gives rise to the complex in biology through natural selection, design in biology is just an illusion. Response: This is self-defeating since you have to be outside of the illusion to know it is an illusion. Once again, the atheist fails his own principal standard. Now, if you remember going back to previous presentations, we talked about the truth and the roadrunner tactic and, making sure that if somebody has a claim that you apply the principle to the claim stated to see if it can even support its own claim. Well, this can't even support its own claim. I mean, at this point, you have a self-defeating statement because Richard Dawkins is saying that design in biology is just an illusion. Well, how would he know that it's an illusion? I'm not having that illusion. How is it an illusion for him? Now, he may be an illusion, but I'm in no illusion here. I mean, what's designed is obvious, and I can tell by my senses. But philosophically, Frank is correct in saying that if you're in an illusion or a dream or anything else, you don't know that you're in it until you're outside of it, or in a case of a dream, until you wake up. So certainly, Richard Dawkins cannot know that we're in an illusion. That's absurd, because if you're in an illusion, you don't know it. Number 5, he says, we have yet to find an equivalent explanation for the appearance of design in physics. The multiverse theory might be that explanation, but it makes heavier demands on luck. So Frank says, in response, there is no evidence for the multiverse, which is correct, and luck is a name for chance. It's a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities or to cover our ignorance when we really don't know what the cause is. If you just roll the dice and you say, I got lucky because it hit what I was expecting or hoping, you don't know what caused it. You don't know why you can't cause it to be like that all the time. So luck is just a word to cover the fact that you really don't know what's going to happen, and it's just chance. It can happen one way, it can happen another. It doesn't really matter. Nobody knows. Number 6, we should keep looking for a better explanation for physics, but even the weak explanation we have now are better than God. Well, that's Dawkins' opinion. So in response, Frank says, this is not science. This is faith based on the hope that evidence will arise, perhaps from nothing, to support the atheist conclusion. Since there is no evidence, it is the old failure of logic which assumes what is trying to be proved. It is not following the evidence. It is hoping somehow that in the future evidence will be found, chance, that backs up a blind theory that is not based on science but on philosophy. The philosophical predetermined position that no matter how the universe got here, it just can't be God. This was made clear when Dawkins claimed that it's possible that some alien intelligence put us here at the end of the documentary, expelled, no intelligence allowed, when interviewed by Ben Stein, which I would highly recommend the movie because it's definitely a big advantage to watching it. It lets you know exactly where atheists are coming from.
That God is a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people.
No, I didn't say quite that. I said something rather better than that.
Oh, well, please tell us what you said. Please tell us what you said.
Well, I would have to read it from the book.
No, please.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
So that's what you think of God?
Yeah.
How about if people believed in a God of infinite lovingness and kindness and forgiveness and generosity, sort of like the modern day God? Why spoil it for them? Why not just let them have their fun and enjoy it?
I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. I write a book, people can read it if they want to. I believe that it is a liberating thing to free yourself from primitive superstition.
So religion is a primitive superstition?
Oh, I think it is, yes.
So you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Why do you think that? I mean, what's your dad? What's your scientist? What's your data?
I think, well, I've had a lot of letters saying that, and I've...
There are 8 billion people in the world, Dr. Dawkins. How many letters have you had?
No, I haven't done that. That's quite true.
Professor Dawkins seemed so convinced that God doesn't exist that I wondered if he would be willing to put a number on it.
Well, it's hard to put a figure on it, but I mean, I'd put it as something like, 99% against or something.
Well, how do you know it's 99%?
I don't.
Say not 97%.
No, I did. You asked me to put a figure on it, and I'm not comfortable putting a figure on it. I think I just think it's very unlikely.
What? But you couldn't put a number on it?
No, of course not.
So it could be 49%.
Well, it would be. I mean, I think it's unlikely, but it's quite far from 50%.
How do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I put an argument in the book.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. But that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
So the Hebrew God, the God of the Old Testament, he doesn't exist in your view?
Certainly, I mean, that would be a very unpleasant prospect.
And the Holy Trinity of the New Testament, that doesn't
nothing
exist.
like that.
Do you believe in any of the Hindu gods? Like Vishnu?
How can you ask such a question?
You don't,
how,
right?
How could I? I
Do you
mean,
believe
why
in-
would I, given that I don't believe in any others?
You don't believe in the Muslim God?
No. I mean, why do you even need to ask?
Well, I just wanted to be sure. So you don't believe in any God anywhere?
Any God anywhere would be completely incompatible with anything that I've said
I assume.
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. You don't believe in any God anywhere?
No.
What if after you died you ran into God? He said, "What have you been doing, Richard? I mean, what have you been doing? I've been trying to be nice to you.
Yeah.
I gave you a multi-million-dollar paycheck over and over again with your book, and look what you did."
Bertrand Russell had that point put to him, and he said something like, "Sir, why did you take such pains to hide yourself?"
But if the intelligent design people are right, God isn't hidden. We may even be able to encounter God through science, if we have the freedom to go there. What could be more intriguing than that?
So that was interesting. Now, it is quite interesting if you actually watch the documentary, the progression through it, and you talk about bias and all that. People can't even mention intelligent design, and just so that we're clear, intelligent design is not creation. Intelligent design is simply the scientific method of understanding that there is intelligence required in order to create a design. That's all. That's all it's saying. It's not saying who it is. It's not saying that it's any particular God or the type of God or the biblical God. It's just saying you need intelligence, which Darwinism is bankrupt. Darwinism claims there is no intelligence involved in the Darwinian evolutionary process. And if there's no intelligence, then what the result is not comparable to a system that just develops on its own randomly over time. Time is the hero of the plot in Darwinism. The assumption is that if you have enough time, then anything is possible. But that's not true. If I held up a rock in one hand and a human being in the other and said, just give enough time, this rock will become human, that's effectively what they're saying. But that's not true. They don't even have the rock to start with. And this is where the problem lies, amongst many problems. So who designed the universe then? I mean, obviously our own solar system has evidence of design, never mind the entire universe. Design is evident even to a casual observer.
Okay, so what? I mean, that doesn't prove that there's a designer. If anything about this universe were changed, this planet wouldn't have come to sustain life. I mean, the odds of a planet sustaining life are so low, but if planets are constantly forming, one planet will come to sustain life eventually. And if any of the tuning of this universe were changed, this planet wouldn't have come to sustain life. That doesn't prove there's a designer, though.
Well, it's not just that this planet came to existence. There wouldn't even be chemistry without some of these factors. There would be no matter. So it's not just a planet argument. It's an argument of the basic periodic table wouldn't be here, which means you couldn't have anything form. So the very fact that we have chemistry is a miracle, so to speak, or a fine-tuning argument. That's really where this argument goes. It's not just about life. You wouldn't even have chemistry if some of these factors weren't just so. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay.
Now
So Turek here obviously is answering this kid, and we'll see a number of these as we walk through this presentation. These are interactions where Frank Turek is out at college campuses, and he does his presentation of I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Then at the end, he gives the students an opportunity to get up and ask questions. And so typically they are skeptics in their questions. Not all the time. Sometimes you get some believers that get up asking certain questions, but for the most part, most of what I give you as examples from these, these colleges and universities is unbelievers, so you can get some understanding of how unbelievers are thinking and approaching these same subjects. So the universe is fine-tuned. Who fine-tuned it? Again, this is taken from I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, that book by Norm Geisler and Frank Turek. The anthropic principle is what was referred to by Frank in that previous video. All right? And this is the quote: "The extent of the universe's fine-tuning makes the anthropic principle," anthropos being man, right, perhaps the most powerful argument for the existence of God. It's not that there are just a few broadly defined constants that may have resulted by chance. No, there are more than 100 very narrowly defined constants that strongly point to an intelligent designer.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life-prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design? Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence to suggest that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
I like those little videos put out by Reasonable Faith, William Lane Craig's ministry. They're on their website, and they certainly are an advantage to us. So, in the fine-tuning of the universe, we'll fly through these because it'll take us far too long to just read them all. But these are in the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. The oxygen level, for example, on Earth, oxygen comprises 21% of the atmosphere. That precise figure is an anthropic constant that makes life on Earth possible. If oxygen were 25%, fires would erupt spontaneously. If it were 15%, human beings would suffocate. Believe me, I've been scuba diving my whole life. The oxygen level and nitrogen level and all that, very, very important. Get yourself into big trouble without it. And that's not something that we made. That was put there by God, and obviously it continues to be maintained. Atmospheric transparency. This is the issue of not having enough transparency in the atmosphere. Creating problems, and then too much transparency would be bombarded with too much solar radiation. I mean, it's just working out perfect. The Moon-Earth gravitational interreaction. I mean, this is perfect. I mean, if the moon was further away, we would have a weaker gravitational effect. If it was closer, the tides would be overwhelming. It's just right, the carbon dioxide level, and no matter what you hear about, the green gas is going to kill us all and everything else, that's not going to happen. That is what we call junk science. So that is more political science, unfortunately, than actual, laboratory science. But that's a whole nother topic for another time. But the CO2 has to also remain the same. Everybody's afraid that it's going to run away and everybody's going to die and this and that, but that's not going to happen. So I wouldn't worry about that right now. Gravity, again, the importance of gravity, we saw even in the little video, can't vary by even 1 part or that percentage point with all those zeros and then the 1. It's tremendous precision that is required. The centrifugal force of the planet, right, as it goes around with the gravitational forces are all perfect. The expansion rate of the universe, assuming that the universe had started from a small point, which, again, that's a subject of another time. We talked about that last time, but even as it is, the expansion rate is what it needs to be in order to support life. The laws of physics can't change. The velocity of light, even slight variations will have a dramatic effect. Water vapor levels on the Earth. Jupiter is a large planet. It's more like a big solar vacuum cleaner to block us from a lot of the debris that comes through. So, it's like a football lineman protecting the quarterback. They're just blocking all the stuff that's coming at us. The thickness of the Earth's crust, right, allowing the volcanic activity and the tectonic plate activity so that it doesn't build up too much pressure, and obviously not too much is released. The rotation of the Earth, the axis we're on, the 24-hour day, all of this is just perfect. These are all constants. The axis, the 23-degree axis tilt is just right, so that the temperatures can go back and forth with seasons. Lightning in the atmospheric discharge. If you had, if it were less, there'd be too little nitrogen fixing in the soil. You ever notice when it rains, your grass is greener after rain than if you just water it, because rain brings nitrogen down into the ground, which is required for growth. Seismic activity, the same thing, how the Earth is working with the earthquakes and everything else.
What do I mean by that? Well, if you take a look at our solar system, for example, where are we? There we are right there, third rock from the sun, right? Third rock from the sun, there's Earth. Well, if we were just a little bit closer to, a little bit further away from the sun, we wouldn't be here. If the axial tilt wasn't 23 degrees of this planet, we wouldn't be here. If the Earth rotation was not 24 hours, we wouldn't be here. The universe is precisely tweaked to support life on Earth. This is called the Anthropic principle in science. That the universe is so precise, just as it is, that if any one little thing were altered, man, anthropos, wouldn't exist. If the gravitational force were altered by 1 part in 10 to the 40, we wouldn't be here. If the expansion rate of the universe slowed down by 1/1,000th, 1/1,000,000th more slowly than it is now, we wouldn't be here. If Jupiter wasn't in its current orbit, we wouldn't be here. See Jupiter? There it is, right there. Why? Because Jupiter acts as a cosmic vacuum cleaner. Its gravitational force is so great that it attracts all the cosmic space junk, all the meteors, to it rather than us. In fact, if Jupiter didn't have one of its 63 moons, we might not be here. Take a close-up look at Jupiter. See Jupiter here? You see those purple marks on Jupiter? What are those purple marks? Those purple marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because without Jupiter, we wouldn't be here. In fact, you want to see how big Jupiter is? Check this out. There's Jupiter, right? Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. There we are. Earth, Mars, Venus, Mercury. Look at poor Pluto. You know, Pluto's been demoted recently. Did you hear that? Pluto is no longer a planet, according to scientists. I think it's size discrimination. I mean, here's poor Pluto. What does he take? 252 years to go around the sun? Something like that? And we just say, forget about it. Forget about it. You're not a planet. Don't bother. Where do we get off saying that? They think that's cool. Take a look at this. You can't even see Pluto. Now, this amazing solar system is amazing, but let me ask you a question. How big would our solar system be if we could take our galaxy and shrink it down to the size of the continental United States? Our solar system would be the size of a quarter on the floor in the Nevada desert. A quarter! And how many galaxies are out there? According to scientists, billions. How much distance is between stars just in our galaxy? This is another anthropic constant. The amount of distance, the amount of miles between our star, the sun, and another star an average distance away is 30 trillion miles. You say, hey, that's a long way, Frank. How long is that? Let me put it in perspective. The space shuttle, when it's in orbit, goes around the Earth between 17 and 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles a second. You got trouble getting to work in the morning? Take the space shuttle. You'll be there. I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we can get in the space shuttle at our star, the sun, and go to another star an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. How long would it take us? It would take us 201,450 years, going 5 miles a second. Which means if you had gotten in the space shuttle at the time of Christ, at our star, the sun, and started traveling to another star an average distance away, going 5 miles a second, you'd be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. The heavens are awesome. And the heavens are a clue to us as to who God is. In fact, February 1st, 2003, Saturday morning, President of the United States went into the Oval Office. They turned on the TV camera. Every major network carried his address. Saturday morning? Looked into the TV camera. He said, "My fellow Americans, our nation this morning has experienced a great tragedy. The space shuttle Columbia, upon re-entry into the atmosphere, burned up in the skies over Texas. There are no survivors." The president then went on to quote from Isaiah chapter 40. Why did he quote from Isaiah chapter 40? Because here's what Isaiah chapter 40 says. This is God speaking. "To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One? Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing." The president then went on to say, The same God that created all those stars and named all those stars knows the names of the 7 astronauts who perished today. We can all now pray that they are safely home. You want to know who God is? Remove all limits from your mind. That's God. You want to know who God is? Look to the heavens. What's in the heavens? You know how many stars are in the heavens according to scientists? The number of stars out there are about equivalent to the number of sand grains on all the beaches on all the earth. And to go from one sand grain to another sand grain, going 5 miles a second will take you over 200,000 years. The heavens are awesome. Only God is more awesome. Most of us Christians have the wrong idea who God is. We think God is like our cosmic bellboy. You know, we like go, God, you who, I need help down here. Well, he's there for that, but he doesn't always do things the way we want him to do, does he? The same God that's holding all those stars together and running the entire universe might have something up his sleeve, so to speak, that isn't in your plans, right? He may do things that we don't quite understand because he's infinite and we're finite. Always keep that in mind. Why are you to make no graven image? Commandment 2. Because any image you make of God necessarily limits his majesty. You can't make anything that represents God because he's completely out of this world. The closest thing we know about it that was in this world is Jesus Christ himself. We saw him in his human form. We saw Jesus in his human nature, but he had a divine nature as well.
Yeah, I definitely recommend either going to crossexamine.org or on YouTube. You can look it up by the same name for Frank's channel, and just some great resources there. Now, in Intelligent Design, this is actually a great book. The Design Revolution, it's old. I think it was written around 2004. But William Dembski, who's the author, he said, simply put, just so that we understand again what intelligent design is, because we're not talking creation at this point. We're just talking that there needs to be a designer because everything's designed. Simply put, intelligent design is the science that studies signs of intelligence. Can't get any simpler than that, right? He goes on. He says, in ascribing the power to choose to unintelligent natural forces, Darwin perpetrated the greatest intellectual swindle in the history of ideas. Nature has no power to choose. All natural selection does is narrow the viability of incidental change by weeding out the less fit. What's more, it acts on the spur of the moment based solely on what the environment at the present time deems fit, and thus without any prevision of future possibilities. And yet this blind process, when coupled with another blind process, namely incidental change, is supposed to produce designs that exceed the capacities of any designers in our experience. Getting design without a designer is a good trick indeed. Darwin was like a magician performing far enough away from his subjects that he could dazzle them until somebody starts handing out binoculars. Darwin's idea was a good trick while it lasted, but with advances in technology as well as the information and life sciences, especially molecular biology, the Darwinian magic gig is now up. It's time to lay aside the tricks, the smoke screens, and the hand-waving, the just-so stories and the stonewalling, the bluster and the bluffing, and to explain scientifically what people have known all along, namely, why you can't get design without a designer. That's where intelligent design comes in. So Dembski is 100% right, and he just lays it out as simple as possible, but yet people keep going back to Darwinism for design. Now, as we get into information and messaging, I think I'm going to stop the video here because I want to kind of start fresh. I mean, I've given you some things to think about regarding design. You can certainly go through and read some of the PowerPoint slides that I put up if you want to get more information. But as we walk through this, realize that it is not possible to have design without a designer. It doesn't really matter what anybody says. Claims are claims. And in order to have a claim that is substantial, there needs to be evidence behind it, and the claim has to support its own principle and its own principle claim in essence. So just saying something is not design does not make it not design. There has to be evidence as to why that is so. And it's unfortunate that evolution, atheistic evolution in particular, has just so taken public schools and, is overwhelmed science to the place where people cannot get a fair shake. It's very difficult to kind of break into anything because the assumption is that that's all true and anything else is junk science, when in fact it's the exact opposite. This is the king has no clothes. And unfortunately, too many people, as they watch the naked king go by, are still continuing to claim that he has clothes. But be that as it may, we'll pick up on this next week. Information and messaging, would take us past an hour, and it's an important subject and something that we need to think about and think clearly. So until next time, may God richly bless you as you continue to study his word.